I sing for all that you've done for me.
Lord, we thank you that you are the God who hears our prayers, and you care about what's going on in our lives. You're with us, and you're carrying us through, even in the times when we can't feel it. And Lord, I pray that for Tina, that you would be with her and her mom, and especially with her just finding out that she has this cancer, that you would encourage her, and that she would find her strength in you, and be with the doctors as they seek to treat her, that they would be able to work out a regimen that will help her to go into remission, and that she would be able to continue on living for you. And I pray for Abner and Kelly as they've gotten their scheduled appointment to interview again for his citizenship. I pray that you would work out the details for that they would be able to resolve the situation, and Abner would be able to get his citizenship so they can go back to Honduras. Lord, I pray for each one of us here today, whatever's going on in our lives, that you would touch us where we are, that you would show us that you care, and that you would bring about your healing and restoration. And we pray this in Jesus' name, amen. What are some of the difficult things about being a Christian, and specifically being part of a church? Does anybody have any? What are some of the difficult things that we face in churches? Commitment. Okay.
Conflict with other Christians in the church.
Did you read my notes?
Yes.
No, it's just a real thing that actually happens.
It's a real thing that actually happens.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't just happen at church, though, right? I mean, it happens at home. Right? It happens at work. It happens while you're driving down the street. It happens while you're shopping at the grocery store. It just happens everywhere. And it seems like there's nothing you can do to keep it from happening. Do you feel where I'm talking about? Do you agree with that? Well, this morning I wanted to talk about navigating through conflict. I'm working on the third book in the Growing series. This one's called Walking in the Light, and it deals with dealing with conflict in the church. And so I finished my series on the life of Paul. So I thought I'd preach a sermon today on conflict, based on what I'm working on in the book that I'm writing. We're going to look at 1 Samuel chapter 25, verses 2 through 39. Some things about conflict that I want you to understand is that there's no way to escape it. There's no way to avoid conflict altogether. You cannot live in such a way that you can completely rid your life of conflict. Can you keep yourself from having a flat tire? Is that conflict? That's conflict. It's conflict with the world you're living in. It's conflict that could very well create conflict later when you're late for work and your boss is upset with you because you're late for work. But here we see in the situation with David that this is a story about three people. Three people who faced conflict in different ways and produced different results. And we're going to look at each one of those people and what they did. The first person I want us to look at is a man called Nabal. It says in chapter 2, now there was a man in Maon, whose business was in Carmel. Carmel was a mountain. And the man was very rich. He had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and beautiful appearance. Right? Just like my wife here. But the man was harsh and evil in his doings, just like her husband. I'm just kidding, right? And he was of the house of Caleb. You know, Caleb was one of the guys. They're talking about the walls of Jericho this morning in Children's Church. And now they marched around the city how many times? 6 times, and then on the 7th day they marched around it 7 times. Right? You guys. All right. So Caleb was there. Caleb was there. And so this is generations later, generation after generation after generation later, he was a descendant of Caleb. So he was a businessman. He was, do I dare say it, a Donald Trump. He was a guy who told people what he thought, did what he wanted to do, and didn't give any regard to anybody else's thoughts or feelings, right? I think we can all agree that that's the kind of guy Donald Trump is. I mean, how many of you ever watched this show, You're Fired? Was that the name of the show?
The Apprentice.
The Apprentice, right? You're fired! I mean, he was forever firing people. And there were people who actually wanted to go on that show to be fired by him. So he was a harsh man. He was a rich man. He was the kind of man who got to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. So David lived in the area there in Carmel. He and his men were running from King Saul. King Saul had run David out of Jerusalem and had made him, not Jerusalem, had run him out of the palace and hunted him down. He was hunting him all over Israel. And David's hiding out in the mountains of Carmel. And while they're there, there's these shepherds, because it was a place where shepherds kept their sheep. There's pasture lands and hills and mountains and all that kind of stuff with grass all over it. And so David's men, he had 400 fighting men, very brave men, very crack military squad. And so they kept watch over Nabal's sheep and his shepherds. They protected them the whole time they were there. So David thought, okay, Nabal is shearing his sheep. It's a time when there's going to be a lot of money flying around, and Nabal's probably planning a feast, and they're probably going to have more than they need, so why not send some guys to Nabal to ask him for some food? He says, at the end of verse 8, the second half of verse 8, "Therefore let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David." So, David isn't really being pushy here. He's just saying, okay, we've done this service for you. We'd like a little something in return. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Just something, just to show your gratitude, right? Was that pretty reasonable of David? I mean, when you do something nice for somebody, don't you expect them to be nice back to you? Anybody like that? Am I the only person in the world who thinks that being nice should produce niceness back to you, right? So David did a kind deed for Nabal and expected a kind deed in return, not an unreasonable expectation. So in verse 9, we find the conflict. This is where everything falls apart. Like in our days, when we're at home, or we're at work, or we're at church, and that thing happens that just, which invariably does. So, in verse 9, "So when David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to these words in the name of David, and waited. Then Nabal answered David's servants and said, 'Who is David? And who is the son of Jesse?'" Now, obviously, if he knows David is the son of Jesse, he knows who David is. He's just insulting him. He's a nobody. You're nobody. And he says, "There are many servants nowadays who break away each one from his master." Obviously, he's talking about David breaking away from Saul and running from Saul. "Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who I don't know where they are from?" Can you put yourself in Nabal's place, if you can? Okay, you're rich. I mean, you're stinking rich. You have so much money, it's like the people on the TV where they light their cigars with $20 bills. You know what I'm talking about? Can you picture yourself there? Have I lost all of you? Nabal's a businessman, right? He's all about contracts and legalese and all about getting the most and squeezing the most out of every business opportunity he can. Right? So he's got these guys, They never had a contract. They never had an agreement that David would be the watchman of his shepherds and his sheep. There was no prearranged determination that they would get paid for this. So he feels like he's being taken advantage of. I mean, I'm sure that's how he felt. I don't know that I would have felt that way, but that's how he felt. He felt taken advantage of. These guys had no agreement. There was no contract, and here they were coming and asking him for money, demanding money from him. So Nabal reviles them. The word is used as reviles them. He insults them, humiliates them in front of all the people who are there for his feast. So what did David's young men do? What would you do? Now, you might be able to identify with David's young men better than you can with Nabal. But if you're doing a nice thing for somebody, and you come and you're just trying to be nice, and they are angry and mean and greedy and hurtful, how does that make you feel? Does anybody feel good when that happens? No, we don't feel good. We get upset. We get hurt. Have you ever had your feelings hurt? No, you guys have never had your feelings hurt. So David's young men turned on their heels and went back, and they came and told all these things, all these words. Then David said to his men, now, you got to think, all right, so Nabal responds to these guys, and he sends them packing. Do you think he believes the conflict is over? Yeah. I took care of that situation. I put them in their place. This is done. Nothing else is going to happen. Until we come to verse 13. Then David says to his men, every man gird on his sword. What do you think that means? It's not good. Okay? These are hardened military crack team of fighting men. So every man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword, and about 400 men went with David, and 200 stayed with the supplies. So, although he didn't know it, Nabal was, when he was disrespectful to David's men, set into motion his own death. Conflict is something that I don't enjoy. But there are people who do enjoy conflict. Right? There are people who enjoy it. Personally, I don't, and I think a majority of people don't. And I think sometimes we tend to do nothing, thinking that by doing nothing, we've taken care of the conflict. Do you think that that's actually true? No. What you're doing is you're stepping out of the resolution process. That's all you're doing. If you do nothing about conflict, you're stepping out of the resolution process. The conflict resolves. The flow of a story. At the center of every good story in the Bible is what? Conflict. Because you can't have a good story without conflict. And every story, once the conflict, everything else is setting. All of the rest of your life is setting until you come into a conflict. And then the process begins. Then you're faced with a crisis. What am I going to do? I've got two choices. Nabal had two choices. What were they? One was to reject the people who came asking for food, or two, give it to them. Now, do you think Nabal ever really entertained the idea of giving them the food? No, but it was a choice he could have made, right? So he's in the crisis phase, and he makes his decision. And he thinks that's the resolution stage, but no. There's the climax stage where everything comes to a head, and everything comes out, and everybody's character is demonstrated by their actions, and then finally there's the resolution. So when we choose not to deal with a situation, we faced a crisis and we have made a decision, but we can't stop it from the story from continuing to go on. We cannot stop it from moving. Any more than you can stop a river from flowing with your hand, you cannot stop a conflict from coming to the resolution. Right? So when you decide to do nothing, you step out of the resolution process. The story keeps going, but you're not going to have anything to do with how it ends up. Or how you end up. Right? All right. So Nabal's disrespect toward David's men set into motion his own death. Now we're in the crisis stage. Crisis stage. So now in verse 14, one of the young men told Abigail. Now who is Abigail? She is a bright, smart, beautiful woman. As bright, smart, and beautiful as Nabal is an idiot. Right? I got to imagine that they didn't spend a whole lot of time together. You know, back then when you got married, it was somebody who was arranged for you. You know, your parents, when you're like 3 years old, get together and, oh, do you want this? Oh, okay, this is a great marriage. And so they arrange for your marriage, and then you meet them on the first day sometimes, and they're your husband for the rest of your life. And my goodness, it's like pulling straws to go out into the wilderness to die. You know, she got the short straw. She got Nabal, and I can't believe that they spend any time together. You know, I hate to admit this, but I watch chick flicks. When I go home, I'm going to lift 150 pounds 200 times just for saying this out loud. One of my favorite movies, chick flick movies, I'm humiliating myself, is Pride and Prejudice. Right? Pride and Prejudice. How many of you ladies have seen Pride and Prejudice? Come on, ladies, show me your hands. How many of you guys have seen Pride and Prejudice? Okay, all right, there we go. But there's a man and a woman who get married in this movie, and the man's name is Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins. He's the cousin of one of the characters, and he marries Lucy. Is that her name? A friend of the main characters, and she says he does. You know, he goes out into his garden, and we can. I find myself that we can spend a whole day without having spoken a word to each other, right? And that's, what was that? I'm quite content with that too, right? Because he's a simpering idiot. But that's, I'm sure, what happened in their marriage. They didn't spend any time together, so it's no surprise that she was not around when David's men came and talked to Nabal. Anyway. So in verse 14, look, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he reviled them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt, nor did we miss anything as long as we accompanied them when we were in the fields. They were a wall to us, both by night and day. Can you get the amount of effort and work that they put into this, David's men? All the time we were with them keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know and consider what you will do, for harm is determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a scoundrel that one cannot speak to him. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread. She is faced, this is Abigail's conflict. She's faced with this. She's going about her day. Just going about her day, doing the good things that she does as a wife and as a mistress of a household, and she's a good person. And she's doing her good person stuff, and she doesn't deserve this, but all of a sudden she's faced with this conflict. So now she's faced with a choice. What do I do? I could do nothing and become a widow. That's not a bad option when you're married to Nabal. Or I can do something that I know will help to resolve the situation in a positive way. Because it wouldn't have just harmed Nabal. I mean, David wouldn't just kill Nabal. He would do a lot more damage than that when he got there. So she decides in her heart quickly what she's going to do. She works out a plan, and so she took 200 loaves of bread. 200 loaves of bread. Picture that in your mind. 200 loaves. How much space would 200 loaves of bread take here? Maybe that section of seats over there. 2 skins of wine. 5 sheep that were already dressed. 5 seahs of roasted grain. A seah is a basket of roasted grain. 100 clusters of raisins. And 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Basically, all she did was raid the pantry. Right? I mean, it's not like she didn't plan this. She didn't do anything extravagant. She just took what she had at hand. Probably some of the stuff from the party that nobody was going to eat anyway. And she just took it up and bundled it up and sent it on its way. Sent it on its way on donkeys. She says to her servant in verse 19, "Go on before me, see, I am coming after you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal. You know, there are, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. True, it's true. Although I do watch chick flicks, I don't know anything what it's like to be a woman. But I know that there are women who struggle with submission. What is, not struggle with it in the sense that they don't want to do it, but what is it? How does this work out in my life as a godly Christian woman? And, you know, in this situation, it doesn't tell us whether it was right or wrong, but she did this without saying anything to her husband. She did the right thing without saying anything to her husband. So I don't know what to say about that, ladies, but there you have it. So, in verse 20 it was, as she rode on the donkey, that she went down under cover of the hill, and there were David and his men coming down toward her, and she met them. Now, you got to picture yourself. You know, this is like a Rambo movie. All these guys, they've got their swords, they're riding down together, 400 men, you know, like every cavalry movie you've ever seen, and they're coming, and they're ready for battle. And they come around the corner, come down the hill, and there's this woman riding a donkey, surrounded by other donkeys, full of food. The shock factor is probably enough to get them to stop. What in the world is going on? So in verse 21, we hear what David had said to his men that we haven't heard yet. It says in verse 21, "Now David had said, 'Surely in vain I have protected all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belongs to him, and he's repaid me evil for good. May God do so, and more also to the enemies of David, if I leave one of all who belong to him at morning light.'" Still alive. He's pretty angry. David's an emotional guy. I mean, he's a passionate guy. He's a musician. You know, musicians they're just passionate people who can really have wide ranges of emotions, right? We can go down to the lowest of lows, and we can go to the highest of highs, and we can be really angry. I don't know if he was Irish, but somebody got that. Thank you. Thank you for laughing. I appreciate that. So he was ready to shed blood. He was furious. But Abigail developed this plan to divert the coming storm of David's vengeance. So now in verse 23, when Abigail saw David, she hastened to dismount from the donkey and fell on her face before David and bowed down to the ground. And she fell at his feet and said, "Oh, on me, my lord, on me let this iniquity be, and please let your maidservant speak in your ears, and hear the words of your maidservant. Please let not my lord regard this scoundrel." Don't you love the adjectives they're using about? It makes me wonder, you know. This scoundrel, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. So his name obviously means folly. "But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my lord whom you sent. Now therefore, my lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has held you back from coming to bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hand, now then, let your enemies and those who seek harm for my lord be as Nabal. And now this present which your maidservant has brought to my lord, let it be given to the young men who follow my lord. Please forgive the trespass of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my lord an enduring house, because my lord fights the battles of the Lord, and evil is not found in you throughout your days. Yet a man has risen to pursue you and seek your life, and the life of my lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God, and the lives of your enemies he shall sling out as from the pocket of a sling." Okay, so she's kind of telling this story, okay? She's telling the story about how David is God's chosen man, and she knows this. He's a godly man, and he's running from Saul, and Saul's pursuing him, but Saul isn't going to catch him, and someday David is going to be king, and she knows this. She's reminding him of this. And so in verse 30, she concludes and says, "And it shall come to pass, when the Lord has done for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and has appointed you rule over Israel, that this will be no grief to you, nor offense of heart to my Lord, either that you have shed blood without cause, or that my Lord has avenged himself." But when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. So she's reminding him of something that he knows in his head but can't remember in his heart right now. And that is the command that God gave through Moses in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17 through 18. This is chapter 2 of the Walking in the Light book. It's going to be based on this. It says, "You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor, not bear sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Have you ever heard that before? Love your neighbor as yourself?
Yep.
This is where it comes from. And what is the context it's talking about? Conflict. It's saying that instead of being a kind of person that hates people, we need to be people who love people. And if we're going to love people, we have to be able to deal with conflict. And we do that by confronting people when they offend us, and then not bearing a grudge. If that's unresolved, we have the prayer of release, and that works great to help us live without having any resolution externally. So she was reminding David that God's law said that he should not take vengeance. And if he did this, if he killed this whole household and all the men in this household, would you think he would be a little upset later on when he cooled down? Did you ever blow up and do something really stupid? Say something really stupid? You guys never do that. Right? It happens. Not in church. Right? Obviously you've never... Yeah, anyway. Okay. That just threw me off, Tom. I can't remember what I was saying. We do things rashly sometimes, and we say things we shouldn't say, and we do things we shouldn't say. And in the heat of the moment, we can do that. And in this moment, Abigail was there for David to say, hold on, stop, calm down, and wait. Before you do something really stupid, stop, calm down, and wait. And so in verse 32, David says to Abigail, and I can just see the personality change. I mean, he's enraged, he's infuriated, he's ready for blood, and he's got his sword on his side, and they're all chomping at the bit, and everybody's waiting. And this little lady, I mean, maybe she weighed 100 pounds, I don't know, and she's talking to David, and then all of a sudden, David's demeanor just completely changes. All of the energy, all of the anger, all of the emotion just drain right out of him. He said, "Blessed is the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed is your advice, and blessed are you, because you have kept me this day from coming to bloodshed and from avenging myself with my own hand. For indeed, as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me back from hurting you, unless you had hastened and come to meet me, surely by morning light no males would have been left to Nabal." So David received from her hand what she had brought him and said to her, "Go up in peace to your house. See, I've heeded your voice and respected your person." So Abigail was able to convince David that his initial response to Nabal's insult was wrong, and that he should change his mind. So the story ending, the resolution, this is where the resolution actually happens. Nabal thought the resolution happened when the men turned and left, but it didn't, did it? Because we've seen the rest of the story. Now in verse 36 it says, "Now Abigail went to Nabal, and there he was, holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. Therefore she told him nothing, little or much, until morning light." And that's just the way it is. Conflicts come, and we can be totally oblivious to the consequences that are looming over our heads because of the actions we're taking, because of the things that we're doing, the things that we're saying. Totally clueless to the calamity that's about to fall on us because of our decisions. So in verse 37, it was in the morning when the wine had gone from Nabal and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him and he became like a stone. So she said, "Oh, and by the way," it's one of the greatest I told you so's in history, right? It's like Paul's "I told you so" after they were on the ship and they got shipwrecked on Malta. He said, "I told you we shouldn't sail here." That's probably these are the top two. And this one. So, how was your day, Nabal, yesterday? This is a rare occasion, I'm sure, when Nabal and Abigail were in the same room together. And I had a great time. I had a bit of a hangover, a little too much party. But I'm feeling pretty good. And so, guess what? Guess what happened to me yesterday? I saved your life. David was on, he was about a mile away from here, and he was going to chop your head off. He was going to kill everyone in his household, and I stopped. So her ultimate I told you so, he died, it says, within him, and became like a stone in verse 38. Then it came about after about 10 days that the Lord struck Nabal dead. And he died. Right? David realized this was not my responsibility to take out vengeance on this person. This is God's responsibility. I'm giving it to God. It's like what we do with the prayer release. We give it to God, let him take care of it. And so 10 days later, God took care of it, and Nabal died. Verse 39, so when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be the Lord who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and has kept his servant from evil, for the Lord has returned the wickedness of Nabal on his own head." And David sent and proposed to Abigail to take her as his wife. Because how are you going to let a woman like that go, right? So he proposed marriage, and they got married and had kids and lived happily ever after, except for the fact that David did a lot of stupid things later. All right, so God used Abigail's quick thinking to avert a disaster and bring about his judgment. So how are we going to apply that to our lives? Because guess what? Sometime you are going to have conflict. Do you believe me? Yeah. In the near future, probably, you are going to have conflict with somebody for something. Big or small, you're going to have a conflict. So when you're faced with conflict, here's some things to remember. Conflict happens to everyone, whether they are mean and greedy or nice and friendly. Doesn't matter. You're going to have conflict. Disrespect is the best way to guarantee a bad end to conflict. All right? When we're faced with conflict, we have a choice. We can either be respectful to the people we're in conflict with, or we can be disrespectful. And being disrespectful, it kind of just guarantees that person, that you're not going to be able to resolve that conflict. It makes it impossible for you to resolve the conflict, because in order to be able to resolve conflict with people, you have to come at them respectfully. Have you ever had trouble with that? Somebody you're in conflict with, our tendency is to want to be disrespectful because we're angry with them. And maybe this is an ongoing conflict, or a continuing conflict, or multiple conflicts, and so you've kind of in your mind lost respect for this person, and so now you're just going to be disrespectful. Well, you've just almost guaranteed that this conflict is not going to end well. Just not going to end well. When conflict comes, you can either feed it. Now, this is from David's response. That was Nabal's response. David's response is, and Abigail's, is that when conflict comes, you can either feed it with emotion or face it with reason. I'm not going to try to convince you that, or tell you that you can be emotionless in conflict. I don't think it's possible for most people. If it's anything important to you, you're going to have emotion. The adrenaline's going to kick in. I worked at the police department on Friday, dispatching, and a lot of crazy things happened Friday night here at Twin Lakes. I hope you weren't in Twin Lakes. It was a really weird night. But my adrenaline gets up, and I get really geeked up and, snappy the next day, and I'm... That's why I was in Nabal yesterday. So, when we get in conflict and we get angry, that emotion wells up in us. And we can either let that emotion feed the conflict, or we can face it with reason. like Abigail. Do you think Abigail was ever angry at Nabal? How could she not be? She was probably the best prayer of release person who ever lived, constantly turning offenses over to God of what Nabal said and did to everyone around her, including her. But she was able to face it with reason, even though there had been many offenses Nabal had committed in the past that I'm sure she was hurt by. So here's what you've got to do. Okay, first of all, if you can't be respectful, don't talk to the person you're angry with, okay? You're listening to me? If you can't be respectful, you shouldn't be talking to the person you're angry with. You gotta take time to work that out. If your emotions are out of control and you're raging, okay, that is not the time to talk to somebody. It's not a time to shoot them a text, write them an email, put a post on Facebook, okay? It's time to stop, think, and calm down. You gotta take time to do it. There was that old thing when we were kids, right? If you found yourself on fire, stop, drop, and roll. Do they still do that? Fortunately, I have not found myself on fire. But I remember that, stop, drop, and roll. Well, when you're on fire with anger, stop, think, and calm down. Before you do anything, before you say anything, before you text anything, before you post anything, stop, think, and calm down. Okay. Resolution. Conclusion. If you follow God's plan for dealing with conflict, being respectful, controlling your emotions, and relying on reason, you will achieve the best possible outcome in conflict. Does that mean you will always have the good, happy ending that Disney is known for in your conflict situations? No, it doesn't mean that, because guess how many people are involved in conflict? At least two, right? When we're talking with people, about people. So you can't guarantee the actions of the other person. If you're in conflict with a Nabal, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. It isn't going to end perfect. But if you follow God's plan, you will achieve the best possible outcome for you. And that's what I'm looking for in conflict. Using the tools God has given me. Conflict is as certain as death and taxes. So be ready for it by having a plan. Okay? I hope you can hold on to this, because it could help you for the rest of your life. If you could grab onto this and start using it. And I've been trying to do that. One of the biggest struggles I have is being disrespectful. When somebody says something to me that I disagree with, sometimes I can go from 0 to 90 in like 5 seconds, and I'm Have you ever seen me like that? You're thinking, there's no way. There is no way Pastor Tracy could do that, but it's true.
You are Irish.
I am Irish. I am Irish, and I was talking to somebody the other day and talking about a person's temper, and I said, that is the temper that I have. So be careful. So that's really where I struggle, is the beginning where I'm dealing with respect, and trying to be respectful to people that I'm disagreeing with. And that's really something that I need to work on. So I hope God has spoken to your heart. Why don't we close in prayer? Lord, thank you for the fact that you have given us this situation and conflict that helps us to know how we should respond. And I pray that you would help us to become better at conflict, Lord. Conflict is so much a part of our lives, and yet it's something we spend so little time preparing for. So I pray that you would encourage us as we would seek to follow you, to be the kind of people who achieve the best possible solutions in the conflicts that we're faced with as we follow your plan.